report, it discusses some of the considerations that CDAC looks at. This lists basically the amount of net tax supported debt outstanding authorized but unissued. They look at the projections for the next 10 years, some of the criteria used by the bond rating agencies, moral obligation, continued liabilities, and the impact on capital spending, cost benefit. You'll see the list there. There are a number of other factors, but these are the primary considerations that they look at when they're coming up to a number. And some of these we'll talk about in depth. So the goal of right now, we have the Vermont is rated AA+, AA+, AA1 by the 3 rating agencies. The goal, which are all one notch below AAA rating. AAA rating is the highest by each of the rating agencies. The goal is to get back to AAA rating. We had AAA ratings by Moody's and Fitch up until a few years ago. Moody's were downgraded in 2018, Fitch in 2019. The goal is to get back up to a AAA rating. You'll get your lowest bond interest rates at that point, whatever. So we CDAC benchmarks the debt metrics to the other AAA rated states, and this is a list of the other states that are rated AAA by at least 2 of the 3 rating agencies, Moody's, S&P, and Fitch. So when we're looking at all the other metrics, these are the states that we benchmark against. Although they also look at debt metrics compared to all 50 states as well. But these are what they use for the benchmark.
So again, if I could just
sure.
So to me, the obvious question is why were we downgraded in May of 18 or October of 18?
So the primary reason it goes to demographic part, yes, long-term liabilities, pension, and the demographics. We're a small state. The population hasn't been growing as rapidly as other states, although since the last census it has picked up a little bit, and they recognize that, but still, as your debt burden grows and your population doesn't, your debt per capita as a percentage of personal income, those have been hurting metrics.
And the attention we paid to the pension question probably helped the last session.
It definitely did help. Actually, we just got an updated rating from Fitch last week. We went through the process. They go through it once a year, and we met with them. And they did mention specifically Act 114, and that was a big help to them. It wasn't enough to move us to a AAA, but it certainly said, it's moving along the path and certainly paying attention to it. And it was a big help. They noticed that. So it would continue.
And the difference between this year and last year, I think last year we might have been at 127 million for the biennium, thereabouts. I can't remember directly, but we're probably we're 20 grand less than $20 million less than that this year. There must have been some factors in there where they decided to be a little bit lower than that. And do you know those factors, or just caution, or?
Specifically on the pensions you're talking about?
Well, no, just the amount of bonded monies that you guys approved last year. I think we were at maybe 127 million bonded last year, and then we're at 108 million this year. So
correct.
It's 20% or 18% less. So there must have been a factor in there to where it caused pause to say we're gonna drop down a little bit.
Right. Yeah. Correct. The last biennium was 123.18 million. This year the recommendation is 108 million, so it's a 12%.
Yeah, 12. Okay. Yep.
And the high point was 2014-15. It's down like 37% since then. So it's definitely trending downwards. So yeah, the lower debt authorizations that all helps.
Yep.
So it's good. On page 7, so this is one of the metrics. CDAC primarily looks at, they use 3 metrics when they benchmark, 3 main metrics, debt metrics when they're looking at comparing to the other AAA states. The first one is debt per capita. And so this shows the last 5 years of debt per capita for the AAA states and for Vermont. One thing to note, when you look at the years, so even 2022, these are based off, Moody's puts out an annual report with all the state debt medians. They put it out generally early, well, May, June. It was a little later this year, but so when they're putting out their 22 report, it's actually based on 2021 fiscal numbers. So, so everything's a year behind. So the pension reform that happened this year are not reflected in these numbers, which these primary debt metrics that we're talking about right now don't include the pension. It's just outstanding debt, but we'll talk later about some of the other things, and those will be reflected next year. So it'll happen in the future.
Yeah.
Sure.
Just Delaware is really interesting on this, what an outlier in terms of debt per capita.
Yes. Yeah, I think they're AAA. There's a lot of federal contracts. And, yeah, I think
And
there's,
corporations.
yeah, right. So, yeah, even though their debt metrics are high, I think that, it's pretty safe payment, right, stream. So,
Well, they're taking advantage of their low interest rates, relatively low.
right,
I mean, you could make a case. Right. where
Right.
they're using debt.
correct. The state guideline that CDAC uses is the 5 year average of the median for this group. So you can see the median, the 5-year median is shown at the top of the chart here, $633 per capita. You can see Vermont is 1185, so it's considerably higher on this debt metric. Out of the 3 metrics that they primarily use, debt per capita is the one that really not the limiting factor. It's because we're a very small state, so we're kind of skewed by that a little bit. But and we'll look later at what that means, and I'll show you the 3 guidelines and how they go. But debt per capita is the first metric that we look at. The next page just shows this is the 50 state median in the blue line, and green is Vermont's per capita. You can see, from 2005 through 2017, we're below the median of the 50 states. Right now, we're pretty much right at the median for the states. So it's we were in a better position a few years ago, but kind of come back to right even with the other states. On page 9,
Just a question I'm
Sure.
on that one. So net tax supported debt, so is that like general obligation bonds, so that doesn't include special revenue stuff or special assessments or?
yeah, so net tax supported debt, and there's a chart later that will tell, but so it includes general obligation debt, it includes the housing bond, the property transfer tax bond, because property transfer tax payments go to that. It included the TIBs, which are the transportation infrastructure. Now those are gone.
Right, but for the other states, does it include those other, because some states do more different types of debt, I think, than Vermont.
Yeah, so it would include, anything that state revenues are going to pay, basically. So I don't know if you have a specific.
Well, I was just thinking like revenue bonds, because we used to do revenue bonds, but we don't anymore. So I don't know if that's included in the tax supported debt for the other states. Because if
Yeah,
it is,
if
then
revenues
that
are in place,
makes
yeah.
us look more conservative than this would otherwise.
Yeah, that's true.
But I don't know, that's what I'm.
Yeah, I mean, the majority, of our net tax supported debt, the majority are the GO ones.
Yeah.
I mean, there are some others. It also includes leases. Now, GASB 87 took effect last year. And now we used to just include our capital leases in there, and now all leases are included as a financing source, basically. So now that's in debt. So we went from about $9 million of capital leases last year. Now we're showing $87 million or so. So, yeah, because any lease with, that's longer than 12 months now is included in your, as part of your overall net tax support debt.
Leases that we have on buildings. Because it's not,
well,
I shouldn't get into this much detail. Are you guys all right?
There's another slide on the side, right, that has.
Are you saying on the debt side or on the revenue side? On the debt
On the
side?
debt side,
Okay.
right. Yeah, it used to be on buildings, capital leases, and we had very few. Now it includes all these.
Okay.
The finance people could probably. maybe
No, that's
give you
not-
more
that's-
on
yeah.
what those
That makes
leases are,
sense.
but yeah. Sure. On page 9, so the second metric that they look at is debt as a percentage of personal income, which kind of represents the individual taxpayer's ability to handle the debt load. The guideline is to perform better than the 5-year median at the peer group. This number is a little volatile, so the CDAC sets the guideline at 1.8% is where they want to be. As you can see right now, Vermont is at 2%, so we're slightly over the guideline. But they do the 10-year projection, and as we'll see in a later chart, you want to get to a number where you're back into the guideline at some point, and you'll see that. So this is the second metric. The third, yes, the next chart shows, again, Vermont compared to the 50 states, which is that is the percent of personal income. And again, it follows kind of the same timeline as debt per capita, where we were under the 50 state median for quite some time, and now we're still just below it, but kind of right on the median. So again, they benchmark to those AAA states, but they also look at where we are compared to all 50 states as well. The next chart on page 11 just shows our ranking on these two metrics, debt per capita and debt as a percent of personal income. So the higher number is better. So you want to be number 50, which basically shows your debt per capita is the lowest. So you can see kind of in the mid 2010s, we were up pretty high. Our ranking has slipped somewhat. We're kind of right now we're kind of ranking that we're ranked 27 and 25 on those two metrics. The third metric they use, this chart shows debt as a percent of gross state product, which is something CDAC looks at, but not one of the metrics. It kind of closely aligns with that. But the third metric that they actually look at is debt service as a percent of revenues. It's similar to this, but not quite the same. But debt service as a percentage of revenue shows the ability of your state to pay, the overall state to pay your debt. It's kind of the report that we look at doesn't really rank those and show what the states are. That's why we don't have a chart for that. So the CDAC sets an absolute number, and we set it at 6%, and we want to be under 6%. Right now, Vermont is 3.7%, which sounds pretty low compared to your guideline, but during the Great Depression, we actually got close to that. In 2010, we got up to 5.7%. So that's why the guideline is 6%. We try to stay well under that, just in case, the downturn, the economy turns on you. You have that cushion. This chart on page 12, it's something that CDAC reviews, but not specifically, use as a metric as percentage of revenue, but it is similar. It's percentage, that is a percentage of gross state product, and you can see just how we rank according to the other AAA states. We're actually not too bad, not too bad. And revenues, so as far as CDAC looks at revenues, they use the general fund and transportation fund combined. Moody's also includes the education fund, so our metrics look a lot better, but CDAC doesn't include it. We just look at general fund and transportation fund. On page 13, this shows our current bond ratings. As you can see, the chart on the right where it's circled, we're one notch below the AAA ratings for all three rating agencies, which shows, again, high quality, very low credit risk. And we do have the highest ratings among the New England states. So, you know, we are in a good position. And as I mentioned, Fitch just affirmed our rating about a week and a half ago. So we're in good shape there, AA plus. So the next page, just I know we showed this to you last time, the three rating agencies, so just some of the factors that they mentioned in the report, some of the credit strengths and challenges that we had. And again, to go back to that question, that some of the challenges, basically the demographics and the long-term liabilities, which some of that demographics are tough to do much about, but the long-term liabilities address that and started last year. That was a big help. So that put us on a good track. On page 15, it talks about some of the recommendations and the comments that CDAC made in their report this year and why they came up with the $108 million recommendation that they did. If you notice, particularly on the chart which showed debt as a percentage of personal income, that the other AAA states have really reduced the amount of debt that they're issuing. And it's weakened our debt ratio somewhat. So states have been increasingly using PAYGO for their capital projects. I think NASBO, the National Association of State Budget Officers, put out a report a year or so ago talking about the amount of cash that's used for capital projects, and it's up to like 74% of spending on capital projects comes from cash. Some of that's federal dollars, but up considerably in the last decade or so. So I know we'll talk about the cash fund later, but that's true. But a lot of states are using cash to fund their capital.
Are there any states that you're aware of that are using all cash for capital construction projects?
Yeah, I mean there are a few states that really don't issue any debt. Nebraska, there are about 4 or 5 states, and CDAC talked about those. I can't remember them off the top of my head, but we can get that list.
It's not important. It's just curious to whether all states bonded or not. So
yeah, there are probably 5 or 6 states that really don't issue any debt. So
So the cash fund in this portion of what we're trying to do this year with what we established last year with the cash fund and stuff, it's favorable, where the governor's said 62 million this year, and then plus what we had with the 25 million using the 20 point whatever million we're going to use. That's favorable with the bond companies as far as it's responsible spending.
yes, and they have mentioned that in our meetings with the rating agencies. We meet them all in the course of the year, and all 3 rating agencies. We mentioned that we had the cash fund that was implemented last year, and that's credit positive. They all mention that. So it's definitely a good thing. It's something CDAC discussed that in their meetings this year. I know that the treasurer testified on behalf of CDAC last February, I believe, and talked about the cash fund and the implementation was definitely a good thing. So,
how long of a process is it with CDAC meeting and determining getting to that number? A couple months or half a year?
Yeah, so generally, the first year of the biennium, there probably an extra meeting or 2, but they also formed a couple of working groups over the last year, specifically looking at the cash fund and, you know, the use of the bond premium, that type of thing. So they had a few extra meetings, but I think they had probably half a dozen special meetings, those working groups set aside, and then once the full CDAC committee convened, I think we had 6 meetings this year. Pretty much end of July generally through the end of September, but the Moody's report was late this year, so the final report didn't come out until November, so it was stretched out over a longer time, but it's usually they do it in a couple months, depending on, you know, what's coming up. There are some other considerations. For one thing, the treasurer is the chair of the committee. We had the new treasurer, Treasurer Pichak this year, so probably gonna get things started a little bit earlier. There's some other issues to talk about, which, you know, we'll mention in a minute, but, so I probably start a little bit earlier this year. I'm guessing, you know, late summer, and have the report ready by the end of September, so.
Could you talk a little bit about bullet point 3, significantly higher than average authorized but unissued debt? What does that mean, and is that a good thing?
Well, it depends, I guess. So when the capital bill is passed, they have all the projects listed in there, and there's a certain amount. So any of those projects, there's authorized but unissued debt.
Right.
When we go out and do a bond issue, we go out and say, okay, how much have we spent on projects? Because we don't bond as soon as the capital bill is passed. When we go out and bond, we'll look at how much we've spent to date, and when we do an issue, we'll reimburse those projects. We'll use state cash up until that point. And then finance and management will go out and survey all the departments looking at those projects and say, how much do you expect to spend of those in the next 12 months? So when we do a bond issue, we'll size it to reimburse what we've already spent and what we'll need for the next 12 months. If those projects are not, you know, they don't spend the money right away, or they're not expected to happen right away, we don't bond for it. So now the amount that's authorized for those projects, the debt is authorized but not issued yet. We have not issued the bonds yet. There's always going to be some amount of authorized but unissued, because once the capital bill passes, you know, we won't bond right away.
Right.
But over the last couple of years, the last several years, the money hasn't been spent on the projects as anticipated. So we'll normally have a certain amount of authorized but unissued. And we kind of looked at over the last 20 years, the average is, you know, maybe $80 million or so. That's kind of out there waiting to be issued. At this point, when we looked at this, right now it's about $198 million of authorized but unissued. And so CDAC had BGS come in, talk about project spending, and, you know, basically why the spending wasn't happening. And there are a number of reasons, but projects take longer. But when BGS does something, the timeline may be several years by the time the project comes to fruition and the money gets spent. So given the amount of authorized but unissued, that was definitely a factor that CDAC looked at. How's that?
Yeah, no, it helps a little bit. I mean, there's factors that over which we have no control, supply chain issues. I mean, a lot of that could have delayed the process of actually issuing something, right?
Correct. When CDAC met, we had looked at how much we had spent to date, and, you know, again, we kind of look at things and say, when do we need to do a bond issue? Because if there is a reimbursement period, once we spend money and the project is put into place, we have 18 months to issue tax exempt bonds and to reimburse that money.
Okay.
We haven't issued since summer of '21. So we're up against that 18-month on any projects that, have been spent since then that we haven't bonded for. When we looked at this, through FY '22, there was only about $21 million that we had spent that needed to be reimbursed, which is a very low amount. I mean, it doesn't make sense to go out and do a bond issue for $20 million. There's a cost of doing it. Since then, we just got an update a week or so ago, and we've now spent about 31 million, I think, year to date in FY '32. So now we're up to about 50 million. So now it's time to, you can start thinking about that. But at the time they met, the spending just wasn't going out the door. And again, you mentioned the second bulletin, essentially the supply chain issues.
Yep.
There was so much federal money that we're sitting on so much cash that, why go up and borrow if you have all that cash, except if we have the reimbursement rule, then there's some other things to think about. But, some of the other factors they talked about were because there's so much federal money and so many projects going on, there's, conflict, getting contractors to do things and, those type of things. High inflation rate, increased borrowing, interest rates are up, so your borrowing costs were up. So that was definitely, CDAC spent a lot of time discussing those issues and saying, they originally, even though they have to give a biennial recommendation, they originally talked about doing a 1-year recommendation and saying, let's see what happens in a year if some of these factors clear up. Ultimately, it was determined that they had to give a biennial recommendation. So they did come back and say, all right, here's our 2-year recommendation, but we'll address it. We may potentially change this in the second year of the biennium, which in the past they always meet and, they've always kept the same amount, but they did mention specifically that depending on these factors, they may readjust in the second year.
And who issues the bonds? Where's the money come from? I mean, just where's that? Where's it come from?
So the treasurer's office issues the bonds. We have a working group, work with our bond lawyers, our financial advisors.
But where's the money come from? It's not coming from federal government, it's coming from a private source, a bond company that has the capacity to loan money, or where's the money derived from?
So we issue a third of the issue goes, we call them Vermont citizen bonds. So we go out and anybody can buy those bonds. So if you want to invest in it, you can buy, we issue 20-year bonds, but we have maturities from years 1 through 20. So you can go to your broker and say, I want a 5-year Vermont bond. This is the interest rate that you're going to get, and it's tax exempt for you. So again, Vermont citizen bonds, so anybody can do that. The other 2/3 of the issue, we just do a competitive basis, and we take bids, and some big investment bank will buy it and they'll sell it off to, probably like money market funds will buy them. But anybody can go to their, individuals or big institutional funds.
And I probably know the answer to this question, but I've got a new committee, so please, what's the percentage on these bonds roughly? Where are we at as far as the percentage of the bonds that we pay back? I mean, we're paying back a percentage of interest back on this money. So what type of interest are we looking at?
So it depends when you go to market. The last issue that we did in 21, our true interest cost, 20-year bonds was 1.43%, which is, it's by far the best we've ever done.
Yeah.
But again, the 1-year maturity, you probably had I forget the rate, maybe like 25 basis points or something, where the 20-year, you're going to get, I don't know, 2.5%. So, and they ladder, as your maturity goes up, the interest rate that you get paid on it. Without getting into too much detail.
Right.
That's your yield. The interest rate may be slightly higher, especially like money market funds want that higher coupon, so they're going to pay a premium on that bond. So I don't know if you want to get into bonds.
No, it's just, you told me what I wanted. I just, yeah, just wanted to see about where it was, where the money was.
Yeah, rates are much, much different now. I think back then, it kind of, the rates we pay are pegged off an index called MMD, municipal market index. I think when we sold them, 20-year MMD was probably like 1.8% or something. Right now, it's probably 3.25% thereabouts. So, interest rates are up a decent amount since we last sold, but they've come down, from a few months ago, but still a decent amount higher than last time we issued, so.
Yep.
So just to recap, so the 24-25 biennium recommendation is 108 million, and as we mentioned, a 12% decrease from the last biennium. This chart on page 16, it might be a little blurry, hard to read, but there are kind of three sections in here. The first, the top of the section shows 2011 through 22. And this shows the first section is the debt per capita. And again, this shows the state of Vermont's debt per capita, the Moody's median of the benchmark states. So this is historical, and then the bottom is the next 10 years projected. Again, CDAC looks at 10-year projections, and you can see anything that's shaded shows where Vermont is expected to be out of compliance with that metrics. And as I mentioned before, the debt per capita is not been the limiting factor. We're out of compliance with where we hope to be, but again, this has not been the limiting factor. The next set of columns shows debt as a percent of personal income, and you can, again, the top past 10 years and the bottom of the projected 10 years. You can see we're out of compliance in 2023, which is shaded,
Yeah.
but expected that by 24 we'll go back into compliance. One thing to note, it is a conservative estimate because this 10-year projection assumes that we'll be issuing $54 million per year, which is consistent with $108 million of biennium, but it also assumes that we'll take all of the authorized but unissued and issue that this year, which
Right.
probably not going to, well, it's not going to happen, but it has been authorized, so
Right.
it is potential to happen. So that's why it's a conservative view, but it is out there, so it's possible. And then the last few columns are debt service as a percentage of revenues, and again, the state guideline is 6%, and you can see, we're projected to go up to 4.5%, but then go back down. As that kind of rolls off, and you're issuing at 54 million, which is a lower amount than we have. So these are kind of one of the main charts that we look at, compare these three debt metrics and look at whether we'll be in compliance.
So it looks like a lot of times we're really right there where, a lot of our surrounding states or who we're comparing to, but yet our debt is still a little bit troublesome per capita. Am I reading that right? I mean, we're still trying to get that under control a little bit. That's why we're coming down on the spotted dollars. So
Right.
we're working hard to stay good.
Right. Yeah, and we are a small state, so our debt per capita, it's tough to get down to that same level, but it is one of the metrics that the rating agencies look at. So, kind of have to take that into consideration. But again, it's not, at least the committee doesn't deem that to be the most important, just because.
Right. And the bonding agencies are okay with us.
Right. Yeah. They look at it, but it's not the most important factor.
Yeah.
So page 17 just shows the amount of authorization through the years. Again, look at 2012 and 2013 was the first biennium. So from there on, even though it's, we just kind of split it into 2 years, just to show the ease. And the last two columns, they're in yellow because, again, that's the CDAC recommendation, but it hasn't been, authorized by the association. And page 18 just shows the amount of general GO debt outstanding through the year. And you can see 22 down quite a bit, starting to tail down. However, we did not issue an FY 22, and with the amount of authorized but unissued debt, it heavily issued even a portion of that. Obviously, here's that number. So, but you can see that kind of the inside of the chart, it's shows the national trend, and you can see that blue line shows the growth rate of net all states' net tax supported debt. You can see how it's been dropping over the last decade or so. So page 19, this is a chart in CDAC, and it shows what makes up the state's net tax supported debt. So you can see the first item, the general obligation bonds. When the state issues bonds, that's what we issue, general obligation bonds, which are backed by any revenues from the state. So there's 579 million broken up general fund. There's some of the older bonds had a piece where the transportation fund had to pay a piece of the debt service. That's why there's a small piece of transportation fund. The next line item, those are the housing bonds, the property transfer tax bonds. There's still 30 million outstanding. They do count as state net tax supported debt because the first $2.5 million every year property transfer tax goes to BHFA to pay the debt service on those bonds. So because they're using property transfer tax revenues, they are considered net tax supported debt in the state. Again, the next line shows the leases, and last year there was $8.9 million in that line. Now we have to include all leases, so that jumped a decent amount, but still overall small number. This next section, reserve fund commitments. This is in the chart, but they're not actually considered net tax supported debt. They're considered the moral obligation of the state. So these agencies issue debt, and the state is not obligated to, if they defaulted on their debt, the state is not obligated. We're not on the hook to pay those, but there is a moral obligation to pay those. So if they defaulted, they would come to the state, and the legislature could approve funds to pay debt service, whatever they owe that year. In reality, it's only a moral obligation, but it's pretty
much expected that if something happens there, we're gonna pay it.
Right. If it didn't happen, it wouldn't be viewed very well. Some of these, this represents the total commitment. Some of these aren't fully used. Like with the bond bank, $587 million. That's by far the largest user of moral obligation. But those are pretty much, those are loans to town and school districts. So it's a very, very low risk. The revenues of the municipalities are kind of backing that. So it's kind of belt and suspenders to the moral on that. The other ones, the rest of these, this represents their total commitment, although they're not fully used in PHFA. It can be up to 155 million, but they're only using about 55 million of that at this point. VITA is using most of that, 175 million, and the other three, DSAC, telecommunications, and UVM state colleges, there's nothing outstanding on that one. Again, they're potential liabilities, but there's nothing outstanding on that. So even though it says there's 1.8 million in contingent debt, there's only about 800, a little over 800,000 that's outstanding at this point. So again, those don't count as your net tax supported debt. So the total net tax supported debt for the state is 692 million. As of the end of June. And the next page, page 20, So Moody's comes out with their debt median report for all the states every year. This year it was a little bit different where they generally focused on those metrics that we've discussed up until this point. Now they're paying more attention, and all of the rating agencies are talking about long-term liabilities, so they're including pension debt in there. It's something that CDAC talked about, and whether to adjust their guidelines. They did not do it for this year, but it's probably going to happen in the next couple of years. So this is just kind of a preview of some of the things that's probably going to happen. So this is a chart that shows, put out by Moody's. This is when you see ANPL, that's adjusted net pension liability, and ANOL is adjusted net OPEB liability. And the reason it's adjusted is, you know, in our actuary reports, you have your total pension liability minus what your pension fund assets are to get to your net pension liability. And the actuary bases that upon your discount rate that we use. And right now, PPIC uses 7% as a discount rate. But all states have different discount rates to use. So the rating agencies take and basically adjust all the states using the same discount rate, just to compare all the states equally. And that's why it's called adjusted net pension liability. And you can see the bottom line. This is the ranking among well, yeah, I guess all these. This is our ranking among the 50 states. And again, higher is better. So you can see we're kind of near the bottom of that. And these are a little bit older, using prior year's numbers, so that, you know, it'll definitely, the pension reform will definitely help. Just looking at, you know, the net pension liability from 2020, the first year they used 2022, which is not on here. Our net pension liability went down 9.8 million, and the net OPEB liability went down 1.2 billion. So total, yeah. So there's $1.2 billion in 2022, like that. So that's definitely, that doesn't show up here yet, but it will.
Think we'll get to double figures?
I don't know, let's hope so, right? So, yeah, and
Higher the better.
yeah. And again, this is compared to the other 50 states, so it depends on what they do too, but,
Yeah.
you know. Fitch specifically mentioned this, and they did say that their next publication, they may even mention that they file, you know, pension stuff, so they're definitely noticing.
How does the rating cut, the rating companies, Moody's and all of them, how do they view raising taxes within the state? Or I'm sure that just gets into everything. I mean, once you raise taxes, it causes more debt for, you know, citizens, the capita for peoples and all that stuff. And I'm trying to phrase the question so that it makes even sense to me. But raising taxes within the state, is that a negative or positive effect on a bond rating as a rule?
Well, I mean, it's tough to say. It is revenue for the state, but it also burdens your taxpayers more. So, you know, it goes into, I don't know that there's a direct correlation. They look at that, but it does factor in.
Yep.
It's, you know, it's one thing to consider. So,
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, on one side, it affects the revenues for the state, so one metric, but it's also affecting, you know, taxpayers' personal income and their ability to. Your district will regardless.
Okay, I'm working on that.
So anyways, so just to quickly wrap up, the last couple slides just shows, you know, Moody's. Again, the bottom line on page 21 just shows our ranking among the 50 states, adjusted net pension liability, debt per capita is in there, personal income and as a revenue. So again, it's kind of similar to the metrics that CDAC uses as far as debt, but this also includes your long-term liability. So it's just kind of something that the rating agencies are now looking at, so CDAC. And then yeah, page 22, this is a chart that S&P puts out. Again, it's kind of the same thing. It shows as a percentage of personal income. You can see the higher the number, the higher the debt as a percentage of personal income. You can see kind of Vermont's ranging 15%, 15.27% for 20 years. In the end, that's personal income. And then page 23 shows as a percentage of revenues. Again, these are long-term liabilities. So this kind of shows what's to come. And page 20, sorry.
No, this is the first time I've seen California listed anywhere. And I was gonna ask you by the time we finished, what is their rating? Are they AAA?
California.
I'm just curious. For Massachusetts?
Yeah, Massachusetts, we have on here.
It wasn't on the first few where we're compared to the other peer states.
Yeah, there is a chart with the New England states on here.
I'm just curious. I always like to sort of feel like we're.
Yeah,
better than
page 13.
The other states.
Well, we are.
It's easy, we are.
13 is where, yeah, so we're the same Moody's and Fitch. We're a notch higher on the S&P, but they're
Okay.
very similar to us, so.
I always think of California as kind of its own country in terms of an economy, you know?
Yeah,
It is.
Oh, yeah. A1, double A.
so yeah, so they're similar. They're not.
Yeah,
below
very
us,
similar.
but
Yeah.
We're still higher.
Good, we're the highest New England state, you said.
Yeah.
Good.
So again, you know, that's pretty much how CDAC looks at things. Kind of wraps up that piece. Are there any other questions?
No, I think you should probably go over it 50 times and be fair. And there's gonna be all kinds of different questions, but that was a good overview as far as to, you know, how it works. And,
Yeah.
I think you could ask questions all day long about it, but I think that was very, a good, better than a high level overview.
Very helpful.
Yeah. Did we lose that?
Yeah, they had to step out. They're gonna reschedule, right?
Yes.
Okay, I know we're going to talk about the cash fund too, which was kind of, they put together the model and the plan to fund the cash fund. They did discuss it with JFO and with our office, so we had, you know, input and answered some questions, but this was primarily their, you know, how they modeled it. Generally the cash fund where, you know, the former treasurer has been bringing this up for several years. Obviously, we think it's a great thing to do, rely more on, you know, paying cash for projects rather than bonding for it. You're better off paying cash, saving your interest, growing that over time, using that instead of bonding. So obviously, we're in favor of that.
Do you know why and how the amount that they got to, the 25 million, do you know why that amount was where it was, or was that a recommendation of somebody, or was that just a number that seemed to, in modeling, that was just a good number?
Yeah, when we discussed that, do you know where it came from? I know it was basically from the surplus from last year.
Dan Biggers, are you talking about the percent allocation? that
Or just
they're-
the-
No, 25 million.
Just a 25 million. How did you come to 25 million? How did it get, okay, we're gonna start this cash fund and it's gonna be 25 million?
I don't think that was, I think that was landed on late in the session, and I don't think that was originally a recommendation from the governor or the treasurer. I just think as they were going through and going, you know, there were these scenarios of like how much excess general fund proceeds we'll have at the end of a fiscal year and how we can spend those. I think the 25 million, sort of, I can't say it was pulled out of air, but I don't think it was an original, it didn't come in January in the governor's budget. It was higher than he had originally, I think it was 6.2 million is what he had recommended.
Yeah, I think when we first started, going to sit dangerous stuff, because it was last year, and I think we were over there in appropriations looking for 10 million. And then, so yeah, I don't have enough recall to remember exactly, but so I won't try to recall.
Yeah, I mean, certainly happy with the funding level.
Does your office think it should be higher? Say it was 50, how would that impact things?
And would we typically see a lower CDAC at that
Right.
point in time?
Right.
Would we start to see more cash versus CDAC, or it gets down to debt affordability?
Yeah, so CDAC did spend a fair amount of time talking about that, and I think they don't want that to influence. There was a lot of discussion that I think CDAC views their role as coming up with an amount that can be prudently authorized for debt. So, I mean, I think they're all in favor of, using the cash fund instead of bonding, but they're looking at the debt metrics specifically and not saying, they're coming up with a number, trying to reduce the debt, but not using cash and, eliminating all bonding whatsoever. That'd be ideal, but.
I don't imagine that we're probably ever gonna be at the state to where we're not gonna bond. We just don't have enough population, enough cash.
And especially the demographics in terms of age
Well,
levels.
I think even the politics of, I mean, when you have that much cash sticking around sometimes, when there's other wants of programs and stuff like that, it's kind of an unwritten rule that, well, it is. I mean, you bond for capital structures and improvements that are gonna be typically 20 years or longer. And so that money isn't, you can't withstand that money. That money's there for the capital improvements, or you just don't bond for it. So, yes.
Well, and then in government, like a family, you have different users using what you paid for at different times. So the folks in 20 years who are using whatever it is should help pay for that. So it's not like, sometimes you think, oh, we should do everything by cash and like our family does it. But it's not a family. You want the future users to pay in because it's more fair. So I would suggest that we still would want bonding or some sort of debt or some sort of long-term financing, even if we had cash.
Well, I just think
Just to be fair.
Well, and it's smart business. I mean, there's just a lot of programs you can get more done as long as you get the ability to pay it back. And like everything's being laid out here, it's just smart business to be able to get more done with how prudent you've been with with paying your bills.
This session gets done with all the food programs, the tax increases, you're gonna see. You're gonna have to take your belts on, tell you, coming down the road, there's gonna be a lot of spending.
Yeah, and that's the challenge, because then you want to even out those trumps.
Yeah, talking about, $500-600 million.
Yeah, if not a little bit better than that.
So I have another question, if I could. You could just explain high level, the difference between the cash fund and the rainy day funds. They sort of have to have a little bit of a connection, I would think.
So the rainy day fund is a reserve.
Right.
I think the cash fund is
It's meant to
specifically
be-
for capital
To be
projects.
used, okay.
Right.
You hope the other one.
You hope the rainy day fund's never spent, but the cash fund, you go into it knowing that you're gonna spend it.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think the funding for the cash fund, they're setting aside a certain percentage of their appropriation, or at least the plan is. And then you have debt service that you have to pay out of that, and then whatever's left, you're putting into the cash fund and drawing that down for certain capital projects. And which is a good thing because, not all projects should be bonded for either, because we're issuing 20-year bonds. You want a pretty long average life on those. Some of the things like, feasibility studies, engineering costs and all that. That long average life, so something like that would be good use for cash funding, capital projects, but.
Well, good.
Yeah.
Any more questions?
I don't think so. Sure there'll be something I should have asked.
Like I said, I'm sure we can sit here for a long time and talk this thing over, but I appreciate it very much. Hopefully, committee, that answered a lot of the questions of how we got there.
All right, well, thank you very much.
Well, we appreciate it. I
Excellent
appreciate it
job.
coming in
Excellent
very
job.
much. Yeah, it was very nice. It's nice to be able to go through something that high right there and be able to understand it. Yeah, that's almost. Yeah.
Oh, now we got trouble.
There we go.
I showed up early this time.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah. Howdy. Next, we're looking at the governor's recommended 24-25 capital budget proposal. Looks like we're gonna go through section 2, and who wants to lead off with that?
Thank you.
Section
Yep.
2.
Into human services. Yep.
I've got the stapled version. I don't know if that's,
Okay.
I don't know. Yeah, I think it's easier for me.
Yep.
Good, how are you? Wendy Harrison.
Okay, so it's just gonna be the Northwest State Correctional Facility booking expansion. That's what we're talking about today?
That is, yes.
Okay.
Oh.
Thank you. Whenever you're ready.
All right, here to propose for this expansion. I'll start with a little history. Back in the 70s, when that section of the building was built, the average business that went through those doors was about 650 per year. Let's fast forward up to where we are now. Pre-pandemic numbers, we get around 7,900. And now we're rolling around 8,000 to 10,000 estimated. So the business in that area it's a lot. The catchment area for Northwest now is Chittenden County, Franklin County, Grand Isle. As you know, Chittenden County is our most populated area, and we do have a lot of business just from there going north. The Chittenden Regional Correctional Facility is an exclusive female facility. We no longer put males in that facility. It's just not good practice. So all those folks are now being transported up north or get to the Pepsi US Marshals beds up there. So there's a lot of business in that. The area of the booking, along with the technology that's in there, we have body scanners, not unlike what you would see at the airport. We have live scan fingerprint machines. So there's just a lot of technology within that area that has to be in that area that has also taken some of that space out. Questions so far?
Well, can you tell us the numbers again? I'm just trying to keep up, and you said the numbers. Those are folks coming into the facility?
Yes, ma'am. Those are folks coming in and leaving. So that would be admissions and those that are leaving back into the community.
And what were the numbers?
Anywhere from 8 to 10,000.
A year.
Yes. So it's like,
St. Albans, right?
yes, yes.
Do you have any pictures of it, of the place?
I don't. I wish I did. I could get some and get those to you.
And it used to be a lot lower.
Oh yeah, over the years, with business picking up. Years ago, St. Albans was a very static population in that facility. We had a lot of long-term offenders in there that did a lot of time. Now it's changed over time. The mission's changed over time. We have a lot of detainers, some sentenced in there, but there's a lot of movement just from those folks going in and out.
And we brought more back home.
We did,
Yes.
we did. I think we have about 125 out of state right now.
We used to have about 300 at one time.
At one time, yep, even before that, I think we were up to about 650.
That's what I thought.
So we have been working to get our folks home. as well. So,
Yeah, that's good news to get it back here.
So what's the overall, just to back up just a little bit, and I think maybe to help the committee a little bit. So the role, the expansion is just to cover the increases in the amount of people that we're seeing that start the parts of possibly incarceration.
Yeah, it's a very important area. Like I said, it's the receiving area. Right now, the officer is at a small desk. That's, there used to be a large counter. Guys could get in there, they could do their job. It's an important part because you're processing individuals.
So when people come in there, are they expected that they're gonna stay there, or they're coming through and, I mean, they're coming in, they're being received in there? I mean, they're coming in and staying in this facility, is that?
That is correct.
Okay.
And there's got to be capacity to hold those folks, right? So you've got the incapacitated folks that are coming in. They stay down there. So you may have 5 or 10 lodgings coming in on top of these incapacitated folks. You've got to have the room to be able to safely deal with these individuals and give them a safe space to be able to lay down, go to sleep for a while until they leave the next day, or get processed to go into the facility into the general population.
What was the word you used? The incapacitated people and the other, sound like long jeans or something. I didn't understand that word. Oh, the categories of folks coming in. You have
Folks that are coming into
Yeah, you have
to go into
right, and
general
incapacitated
population.
isn't an official category,
Right,
but,
general population, so they would go in, they would come in, they would go into general population.
right, but there were other folks coming in. Maybe you'll say it again. I don't know. It was,
Sorry.
okay. So how many beds are there? Or
Currently, 3 cells, 2 in each cell.
I'm sorry, in the whole facility? Well, so the booking has 3 cells, and then how about the whole facility? How much?
Capacity is about 240.
240,
Um,
and that's the same that it has been, right?
Well, it's been that way for many years, yeah. We haven't lost any beds there.
So, but you're getting more in and out, that's because of the detainees?
Yeah, that area, it's just not big enough for the business that's in it. That's really the bottom.
Right, no, I understand, but you said, and the admissions previously, it's 8,000 to 10,000 a year now. You said it was something much lower
Yeah,
in
that-
previous years.
First built in up to, I think it was the early 80s, there was about 650 in and out a year.
Because those were the long time people.
Yes, less business. They didn't take lodgings off the street, right? And that used to be Chittenden Regionals, right? That's what they did. That mission has gone up north.
Lodging, that's the word. I didn't know what that meant. Okay,
what does that
What
mean?
does that mean?
A lodging is somebody who's being admitted to stay in a lodge for a while with us. Lodgings.
So
Coming
what
to
does it
stay.
mean a little bit more? Can you explain, I mean, do you
Is
know
this
yet?
somebody who's
I don't
drunk on the
know.
street, you're bringing it over, and like, I just can't even picture what sample type of person this would be.
It's a phrase that we use for somebody that's coming through the back door and will be staying with us for more than 24 hours.
Because
of
why?
Of committing a crime
So they've been picked up for something.
or being brought in maybe on a probation violation or somebody who's just been sentenced at court that's coming in to serve a sentence, drug court violations. There's all manner.
So they're temporary people.
They could be, but you could also have somebody who just was sentenced by the court for 5 to 10 years or
Okay. As opposed to the incapacitated.
as opposed to incapacitated people who are brought to us as a protective custody.
Okay,
Somebody who is drunk or under the influence of drugs and need a safe spot to sleep for the night, 24 hours generally. until we're sobered up, and then we get them out.
So those are the two main categories coming in.
Two main categories coming,
Okay, a lot of subset to the lodging category.
correct.
Okay. Yeah, no, that helps a lot. And just because you have terms that we don't, at least I don't know.
Have to sling those around.
That's all right. We
Sorry.
gotta know the lingo, so we
Yeah,
can sling it too.
We don't want you to be lodged there, okay?
We
don't want you to be a
domestic.
I don't want you to be.
Just don't do something to figure out how it works.
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about the physical expansion that you're looking to have happen?
Yeah, sure. A larger space to work in.
Yeah.
We just need that. The cells right now, because of the size of them and the amount of people coming in, we may have people on the floor. There's just.
So how many square foot would you say that this expansion is gonna?
You want me to step in?
Yeah.
Yeah, just slide on a little bit. For the record, Joe Agent, the Building and General Services. So what we're looking at right now, and this is under preliminary planning that we put together using the commissioner's planning. We're using contingency funds. So we have Kevin White, he's over here, project manager. I thought I'd bring him in first
Yep.
time.
Yep.
So do whatever you have to do. Suffer. So through that planning process right now, what they're looking at, and it is in your books, that we're looking at possibly two additions. One, the booking area itself to expand into the existing administration area. And so what that is, if you go to the facility, you have the administration area, which is open to the public, everybody who's visiting publicly gets to come in that way, including staff. Then you have the intake area, the booking area, which is basically through the vehicle sally port and get processed in that way. Right now, they are side by side. And so what they're looking to do is, the thought being is, since they're side by side, expanding the booking area into the administration area and creating a new booking, administration area outside detached from the building. Whether it will be completely a separate building or not, because of the issues of, between the administration building and the main building, having to shovel the walks and like, so that's still in the planning phases. But this is what we presented to you, and it's in the write-up, that right now it is, the administration building is separate, but a little more has to go into that. And the square footage for that, we were looking for the administration building is 60 by 32.
Seems small.
We have in the administration area right now, been there for years, but you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 offices. They're coming in with up to restrooms.
Conference room? I mean,
Conference rooms beyond that, outside of the area,
okay.
This does not increase the population size,
it does not.
because that you have, right now, you're all right, okay.
So the booking area would take over what's now administration?
Yes, that's the theory that we're running on right now.
And how many more cells does that mean?
That I don't think we have even gotten to that point yet, of how many holding cells in the booking area there would be.
Okay.
Right now, if someone is charged, that's where they bring them, St. Albans.
Right.
They don't bring them to Springfield or, they don't.
Newport area, no, as Matt said, those three
That's what-
counties is where they're headed.
That's what.
The Chittenden, because of the women's
Well,
facility
it
and
used
all.
to be years ago, we did that, brought it there. Correct. Before. So, yeah, that needs something to, the other doing, there's nothing in here this year for the women's facility.
Yes, there is. That'll be coming sooner or later to you.
Okay.
The house, but yes, that's a continuing process that we are working on. That is coming later.
It
If
looks
I get
like,
invited.
Yeah.
it looks like
You're-
on for 2.5 and then 600 coming out of the cash fund. If I'm looking at the budget, right?
600 from the cash fund, and yes, 2.5 out of bonded money. So
And that's if you continue, I mean, because this is the beginning of the process, the 600.
the 600 would be actual design. So what Kevin is working on right now is getting that planning done to really look at a larger scale to go, how many cells, beds do we need inside for the booking area? And truly what size that admin area needs to be, and roughly how it works in with the existing building. Once that's completed, permit corrections, reviews it, approves it, and we look at it and we're okay with it, then we'll go into the design phase. Then we would get an engineering firm on board to complete that design.
And that's the 2.5?
That is the 600,000.
That's just
Yeah,
600, so then
the
when,
2.5 is for construction.
good, okay, I was hoping that that was the case. So that's pretty quick.
All goes well.
Yeah.
I don't lose any
Kids will
more
be
employees. but
Optimistic.
yes.
And committee, in this book right
Said that
here,
already.
in this book right here, on page 35, it has a little bit more, and I should have directed you to that. at the beginning.
Yeah. I was
So it
looking
does,
at that.
does have a little bit more detail as far as what that building's gonna look like.
Thank you, nice.
Tough job, that corrections. That's a tough department. Every time I look at it, I got, because you can't seem to make, it's hard to make headway because you got coming in and out, and oh my God, it's just. I
The
don't
last
know.
couple of years especially.
Oh, I know, and I see that the commissioner and those people on TV, I say, oh my God, it feels so bad because it's such a tough job. It's just, you try to do things this way, somebody criticizes you this way, you try to, people want to let everybody out, and people want to lock everybody up, and it's just.
So the staff keep it together.
Staff, I mean, I don't know how the staff, it's a tough job, it's a tough job. I just sympathize with them, you go to work every day, you don't know what's gonna happen. Wow. I know, it's.
For committee, any questions that you want to ask? Well, we have everybody here.
I'd just like to see a picture or a sketch. Right,
The whole facility?
or just,
You want
yeah,
something
probably,
like that?
yeah, I mean, just to start getting familiar with it.
But here you go, right here.
Oh, good. I mean, I know the southeast one, southeast, southern,
Southern
Springfield. I went there,
Southern state,
yeah.
Springfield.
So then this is, oh, it probably has a plan.
Kevin, why
But
don't you
is all
share?
the color part new?
Yeah, I added the green and the orange so that you can differentiate the two areas. So the green is like how the people go in and out.
There is a booking area now, so this is an existing floor plan that Kevin just shared. So the green highlight is the booking area. So you have a garage here that you come in for the Sally Port, and here's the 3 cells. And then this, in the yellow area, is the administration area.
All right, so I'll share this with folks, but maybe you can make us a copy? Is that all right, or not? Is there,
We have more, we will let you keep it.
okay,
Okay.
cool.
Yellow's admin, green is booking.
Joe's familiar with that, he's been in there.
So it's not a
Only the
new,
80s stuff, no, and not lately.
You cleaned up quite well.
But a suit and tie, and I'm good.
Let's slip that one in for you.
So then the design would include figuring out where the new administrative part would be.
That would be at the top of the page, is roughly where would the new administration is.
yeah, it sounded like it was gonna be a separate building, but it's really an
Right now, the
extension of
booking area is
building or
complaining,
expansion.
in some way, it is easier to have it connected, but having it separate also is a
Yeah.
bonus. So this is the process, the planning that we will go through to determine that.
So you're not saying that's that's
That's
just
existing. That is
existing?
just
Oh, I
existing.
misunderstood, okay.
That's how,
Okay. Tell you where you can figure it. Right, but we can keep it.
I think good part of St. Albans, you got room to expand, you got room to. The town is receptive and everything else, that's one of the good things, I believe.
This here should be inside of the correctional facility overlay, so that shouldn't be a problem at all. We're not looking for large expansion, so it's not adding beds, so that's, it's just dealing with the intakes that we're already dealing with, that are already coming to the facility and how to better house.
How old's that facility?
70s?
At least in the 70s, started out as a juvenile facility, way back when, before my time.
Yeah, just amazing on the increase of going on in society, I guess, to be 75% up, and your population is 75% higher. And to just to have that turn of events to, I know, it's just amazing that I don't I don't know, I guess I don't see the laws have gotten any tougher enough to create that type of increase. It's just,
A lot of it's drug where you have it 25 years ago.
Yeah. it's just,
That's a lot of,
well, it just tells you that, you know, there's a lot of pressures out there, not to incarcerate, but when you see that we need to do expansions just to take care of the caseload that's coming in, that maybe we have to rethink some of that, but that's not us to decide in this committee. But anyways,
Yeah, and poverty is a huge issue. Someone, I mean, that's really important to just
well,
acknowledge.
you know, it's all important. I mean, but when you look that we've got to increase, when the population hasn't increased and they're 75% busier than what they have been ever in the history, enough to where they're gonna add an addition onto a building to take care of people that have been charged with something. Something's going on.
That's,
Something's
right.
something's going on. So, yeah, so.
we used to run about 60 women incarcerated, now they're over 100 and something.
Today's count, over around 100, a little over.
One segment, it's growing.
Yep.
What the reason, I don't know, but it's just, we used to run 60, I thought that was a big population.
But then the detainees too, that's something I learned about more yesterday, was just the people who haven't been convicted yet.
Right.
Who used to go into jails, not into prison. And you can make a case for having them be separated. But I think that's a pretty good proportion of the women I know. You know, the number?
It's like versus, I think we have about, I think less than a third are retainers.
Okay, that's, and yeah, in
Well, the
Springfield.
courts backed up a lot, the courts.
That's the thing, and
That's
that's,
the problem, yeah.
The courts backed up for years, and that didn't move anybody, and there- some people were there for the last year waiting.
there's still quite a back.
Right, and they haven't even had a trial yet.
No, that's what I'm saying. So
Yeah.
I think this virus, or a couple, 3 years now, whatever it's been, it's changed a lot of that, courtrooms, some were closed for a year or so.
Any more questions? All set? Thank you. Thank you very much.
Did you want to talk about the
Appreciate it
other
very much.
things or
Thanks for
not?
coming in.
Do you-
Appreciate it very much.
The other thing, yeah, so this was the only one on the
Only
docket
that.
today.
Okay.
Come back another day.
Glad you're coming back.
I get your email.
Can I send this to?
Eric will take care of that.